What happens when one of the most anticipated television interviews of the year turns into an absolute disaster? When a guest forgets who invited them onto the stage and decides to attack the very person trying to give them a platform? It only took 37 seconds of entitlement and disrespect for everything to come crashing down in the most spectacular way imaginable. Diane Sawyer sat in her chair, poised and professional as always. The studio lights were bright, the cameras were rolling, and millions of viewers were tuning in from their homes. This was supposed to be a meaningful conversation. Diana had built her entire career on asking tough questions while treating every single guest with dignity and respect. She was known for her fairness, her kindness, and her ability to make people feel heard. Across from her sat Meghan Markle, someone the audience had been curious about for quite some time. Diana smiled warmly and began with what seemed like a simple question. Thank you so much for being here today. I know so many people have been wanting to hear your perspective. Can you tell us what brought you here tonight? Meghan shifted in her seat and looked directly at Diana with an expression that wasn't quite friendly. Well, Diana, I'm here because I have things that need to be said. Things that people need to understand about my life and my experiences. Diana nodded encouragingly. Of course. That's exactly why we wanted to have this conversation. Help us understand what you've been going through. But instead of opening up, Meghan's face hardened. You know, it's interesting that you say that, because I'm not sure you really want to understand. I think you just want a story. Isn't that what this is really about? The studio went quiet. Diana's smile didn't waver, but there was a flash of surprise in her eyes. She had interviewed presidents, world leaders, and countless public figures. She knew how to handle difficult moments. I can assure you, that's not the case at all. We're here to listen to whatever you'd like to share. This is your time to speak your truth. Meghan let out a sharp laugh. My truth? See, that's the problem right there. You're already framing this like there are multiple truths, like what I'm about to say might not be real. That's exactly the kind of gaslighting I've had to deal with. Diana's voice remained calm and steady. I apologize if it came across that way. That certainly wasn't my intention. Please, go ahead and share what's on your mind. You apologize? Meghan leaned forward. Do you know how many times I've heard empty apologies? Words that don't mean anything? I didn't come here to be patronized, Diana. The audience was completely silent now. People in the studio were exchanging confused glances. This wasn't how interviews were supposed to go. Diana had simply asked her to share her story, and somehow it had already turned into something else entirely. Diana took a breath and tried again. I'm not trying to patronize you at all. We invited you here because we thought you might have important things to say. The floor is yours. The floor is mine? Meghan's voice rose slightly. How generous of you. How absolutely gracious to give me permission to speak on your show. Do you hear yourself right now? Diana's professionalism was being tested in a way it rarely had been before. I'm simply trying to facilitate a conversation. That's what I do. That's what this show is about. Meghan shook her head slowly. No, Diana. What this show is about is you sitting there in your comfortable chair, in your expensive outfit, asking questions that you already know the answers to. It's about you looking good for the cameras, while people like me have to bare our souls for your ratings. The producer in the control room was frantically trying to decide what to do. This was live television. Millions of people were watching this unfold in real time. Diana remained composed. I understand that opening up can be difficult, and I want you to know that you're in a safe space here. Nobody is trying to exploit you or your story. Safe space? Meghan actually laughed out loud at this. You think this is a safe space? With all these cameras? With all these people watching? You have no idea what safe even means. You've never had to fight for anything in your life, have you, Diana? That crossed a line. The audience gasped. Diana Sawyer had worked incredibly hard to get where she was. She had earned every bit of her success through decades of dedication to journalism. Diana's voice was still kind, but there was a firmness to it now. I think that's unfair. You don't know my journey or what I've been through to be here. Oh, please. Meghan rolled her eyes. Don't compare your journey to mine. You have no idea what it's like to be judged, to be criticized, to have every single thing you do picked apart by the media. Diana could have pointed out the irony. She could have mentioned that she had faced plenty of criticism throughout her career, but she didn't. She tried to steer things back on track. Let's refocus. You mentioned wanting to share your experiences. I'm here to listen. What would you like people to know? Meghan stared at her for a long moment. You know what I'd like people to know. That shows like this are part of the problem. You sit there pretending to care, pretending to be interested, but really, you just want drama. You want tears. You want me to break down so you can get your viral moment. Diana's patience was extraordinary, but even she had limits. That's absolutely not true. I've built my career on respectful dialogue and honest journalism. I've never exploited anyone. Never exploited anyone? Meghan's voice dripped with sarcasm. Do you really believe that? Every person who sat in this chair has been used for entertainment. You dress it up as journalism, but it's just gossip with better lighting. The crew members were looking at each other in disbelief. They had worked on this show for years. They had seen Diana treat every single guest with respect and care. This was unlike anything they had witnessed before. Diana tried one more time. I'm sorry you feel that way, but I can promise you, that's not what we're trying to do here. If you'd like to share your story, we're ready to listen. If you'd prefer not to, that's okay too. Oh, how understanding of you. Meghan's tone was mocking now. Let me guess, you're going to edit this later to make yourself look like the hero, and me look like the villain, right? That's how this works. Diana shook her head. This is live television. There's no editing. What's happening right now is what everyone is seeing. Even better. Meghan smiled, but it wasn't a pleasant smile. Then everyone can see exactly what I'm talking about. They can see how people like you operate. Always so calm, always so collected, always pretending to be above it all. Diana had to make a choice. She could continue trying to salvage this interview, or she could acknowledge that this wasn't working. She chose honesty. I want to be clear about something. I invited you here with nothing but good intentions. I wanted to give you a platform to share whatever you felt was important. But what's happening right now isn't a conversation. It's not a dialogue. And I don't think it's fair to my crew, to this audience, or to the viewers at home. Meghan stood up abruptly. There it is. I knew it. The moment I don't play along with your script, you shut me down. This is exactly what I'm talking about. You can't handle the truth. Diana remained seated, but her voice was clear and firm. The truth is that you've spent the last several minutes attacking me personally, instead of sharing whatever message you came here to share. I've tried multiple times to give you the opportunity to speak, and each time you've responded with accusations and insults. Insults? Meghan looked incredulous. I'm speaking facts. I'm calling out the system. I'm refusing to be another one of your puppets. Diana stood up now, too. Nobody asked you to be a puppet. I asked you to have a conversation, a real one, but you can't have a conversation when one person is only interested in being combative. Combative? Meghan's voice got louder. You think I'm being combative? I'm being honest. Maybe you're just not used to people who don't bow down to you. The audience was completely stunned. Some people were shaking their heads. Others were whispering to each other. This had gone so far off the rails that nobody knew what would happen next. Diana took a deep breath. I think we need to end this interview. This clearly isn't productive for anyone." "You're ending it?" Meghan looked triumphant, as if this proved her point. "Of course you are, because you control everything, right? You decide when people get to speak and when they need to be quiet." Diana's voice was steady, but final. "No, I'm ending it because you came here with an agenda that had nothing to do with having a genuine conversation. You came here to attack me and to attack this show, and I'm not going to let that continue." Meghan grabbed her microphone and yanked it off. "Fine, I don't need this anyway. I don't need you or your show or your fake sympathy. You know what? You're everything that's wrong with media. You're everything that's wrong with this whole industry." Diana didn't respond to the insults. She simply said, "I'm going to have to ask you to leave now." "Oh, I'm leaving." Meghan started walking toward the edge of the stage. "And everyone watching this will know exactly who you really are. They'll see how you treat people who don't fall in line." Diana addressed the camera directly, something she rarely did during interviews. "I want to apologize to everyone watching. We had hoped for a meaningful conversation tonight, but unfortunately, that's not what happened. We always try to approach every interview with respect and openness, and I'm sorry that this turned into something else entirely." Meghan stopped and turned back around. "Don't you dare apologize for me. Don't you dare try to spin this like I'm the problem here." Diana's voice was quiet, but firm. "I'm not spinning anything. I'm simply stating what happened. And what happened is that you came onto this show and immediately started attacking me instead of engaging in the conversation we had planned." "We had planned?" Meghan walked back toward Diana. "You mean the conversation you had planned? The one where I was supposed to sit here and answer your questions like a good little guest? Well, I'm not doing that. I'm not playing your game." Diana had reached her limit. "This isn't a game. This is my life's work. This show represents decades of journalism and thousands of conversations with people from all walks of life. And never, not once, have I had someone come on and behave the way you're behaving right now. Maybe that's because everyone else was too scared to call you out." Meghan's voice was sharp. "Maybe everyone else just wanted to be on television so badly that they were willing to play along with whatever you wanted." Diana's voice rose slightly for the first time. Or maybe, just maybe, other people understood that having a platform is a privilege, not a right. That when someone invites you onto their show, you don't respond by insulting them and questioning their integrity. The security team was now standing by, waiting for a signal. They had never had to remove a guest before, but they were prepared to do so if necessary. Meghan pointed her finger at Diana. "You want to talk about integrity? Let's talk about integrity. Let's talk about how you invite people on here and then twist their words. Let's talk about how you edit things to create whatever narrative you want." Diana's voice was ice cold now. "This is live. There is no editing. Every word you're saying right now is going out to millions of people exactly as you're saying it. And what they're seeing is someone who came here not to share their story, but to create a scene." "A scene?" Meghan laughed bitterly. "This is reality, Diana. This is what happens when someone doesn't let you control them. You can't handle it." Diana looked directly at her. "What I can't handle is disrespect. What I can't handle is someone coming into this studio and treating my crew, this audience, and me with such contempt. So I'm going to ask you one final time. Please leave." Meghan stood there for a moment, clearly debating what to do next. The entire studio was holding its breath. Would she leave peacefully? Would she continue to argue? The tension was unbearable. Finally, Meghan spoke. "You know what? Fine, I'll leave. But not because you told me to. Because I'm choosing to. Because I don't want to waste another second in this place." She turned and started walking toward the exit, but she couldn't resist one final comment. She turned back to the camera and said, "To everyone watching, remember this moment. Remember how they treat people who speak their minds. Remember how quickly they silence voices they don't like. Diana didn't take the bait. She simply stood there, dignified and composed, waiting for Meghan to leave. Meghan walked off the stage, her heels clicking loudly in the silent studio. The heavy door closed behind her with a thud that echoed through the space. For a moment, nobody moved. Nobody spoke. The audience sat frozen, trying to process what they had just witnessed. Diana turned back to the camera. Her voice was calm, but there was emotion there too. Real emotion. I've been doing this job for a very long time. I've interviewed people in the midst of personal crises, people dealing with unimaginable pain, people with controversial views, and people who were angry at the world. But I've always believed that everyone deserves to be heard, that everyone has a story worth telling. And I've always tried to create a space where people feel safe enough to share those stories. She paused, collecting her thoughts. The camera stayed on her face, capturing every nuance of her expression. What you just saw was not what we had planned. It was not what we had hoped for, but it was real. And I think that sometimes the most important thing we can do is show people reality, even when it's uncomfortable, even when it's not what we expected. Diana looked down for a moment, then back up at the camera. I want to be clear about something. I don't believe in silencing people. I don't believe in shutting down conversations. But I also believe that conversation requires two people who are willing to engage with each other in good faith. And when that's not happening, when one person is only interested in attacking and not in communicating, then it's not really a conversation anymore. The audience was listening, intently. Some people were nodding. Others were still in shock. I invited that guest here tonight because I believed she had something meaningful to say. I still believe that. But what happened instead was a series of personal attacks that had nothing to do with whatever message she might have wanted to share. And at a certain point, you have to draw a line. You have to say, this isn't productive. This isn't helping anyone. Diana's voice grew stronger. I'm proud of this show. I'm proud of the work we do. I'm proud of the conversations we've had over the years. And I'm not going to apologize for maintaining standards of respect and civility. Those things matter. They matter in journalism. They matter in media. And they matter in how we treat each other as human beings. She looked directly into the camera, speaking to the millions of people watching at home. If you're watching this and you're confused about what just happened, I understand. So am I, to be honest. We prepared for a thoughtful interview. We prepared questions that we hoped would lead to meaningful dialogue. But you can't force someone to engage if they're not willing to. Diana's expression softened slightly. I hope that everyone watching tonight can take something away from this. Maybe it's a reminder that communication is a two-way street. That being given a platform comes with a certain responsibility. That respect matters, even when we disagree, especially when we disagree. The studio was so quiet you could hear a pin drop. Every person in that room was hanging on Diana's every word. I've always believed that my job is to ask questions, to listen, and to help people tell their stories in their own words. I've never wanted to be the story myself. But tonight, I became part of the story, whether I wanted to or not. And I think the only way forward is to be honest about what happened and why. Diana took a deep breath. What happened tonight was a breakdown in communication. It was a situation where one person came with expectations that didn't match reality, where accusations were made that weren't based in fact, where personal attacks replaced genuine dialogue. And while I wish it had gone differently, I don't regret standing up for myself, for my crew, and for the integrity of this show. She glanced at the audience, then back at the camera. To everyone who works on this show, who puts in countless hours to make these conversations possible, thank you. You deserve better than what happened tonight. To the audience members who came here expecting to witness a meaningful interview, I apologize that it turned into something else. And to everyone watching at home, thank you for sticking with us through what was clearly an unusual and difficult moment. Diana's voice took on a note of finality. We'll be right back after this break, and when we come back, we'll try to salvage what's left of tonight's show, because that's what we do. We keep going. We keep trying to have important conversations. We keep believing that dialogue matters, even when it's hard, especially when it's hard. The camera slowly zoomed out as Diana stood there, alone on the stage. The empty chair across from her a stark reminder of what had just transpired. The lights dimmed slightly as they cut to commercial, but not before the audience saw Diana close her eyes briefly, collecting herself, preparing to continue with the professionalism and grace that had defined her entire career. When the show came back from the break, Diana was seated again, composed as ever. She didn't rehash what had happened. She didn't dwell on the drama. Instead, she moved forward, because that's what professionals do. They handle difficult situations with dignity. They maintain their standards, and they continue doing the work they believe in. The control room crew exhaled collectively. They had just witnessed television history, the kind of moment that people would talk about for years to come. Not because it was planned or scripted, but precisely because it wasn't. It was raw. It was real. And it showed what happens when preparation meets the unexpected. In the audience, people were still processing. Some were angry at what they had witnessed. Others were impressed by how Diana had handled it. But everyone agreed on one thing. They had never seen anything quite like that before. Diana continued with the rest of her show, interviewing other guests who had been scheduled to appear. She gave them her full attention, asked thoughtful questions, and created the kind of engaging conversation that her viewers had come to expect. It was as if she was making a point. This is what real dialogue looks like. This is what respect looks like. This is what happens when two people come together in good faith. But even as she moved forward with professionalism and grace, everyone knew that this night would be remembered. Not for the interview that should have happened, but for the confrontation that did. Not for the questions that were supposed to be asked, but for the accusations that were thrown instead. Not for a moment of understanding, but for a moment of conflict that revealed something important about respect, communication, and the responsibilities that come with having a public platform. The studio audience filed out slowly after the show ended, still talking among themselves about what they had witnessed. The crew packed up the equipment, replaying the moment in their minds. And Diana sat in her dressing room, probably reflecting on a night that had tested her in ways she never expected. This was television at its most unpredictable. This was what happened when someone mistook an invitation for an opportunity to attack. This was what happened when entitlement met professionalism. And this was what happened when a host who had spent decades treating people with dignity finally had to draw a line and say enough. The cameras had captured Second, the microphones had recorded every word, and millions of people had watched it all unfold in real time, unable to look away from a train wreck that nobody saw coming. It was uncomfortable, it was shocking, and it was absolutely unforgettable. This was the night that an interview became an altercation, and a guest forgot that respect is not optional, it's essential.